Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual conversation on partnering to feed students and families during COVID-19. I'm Elise Cohen, the Senior Director for Food, Health, and Wellness Programs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. In this role, I work with companies to help them develop and share their social impact and employee engagement initiatives that aim to improve health and well-being for all. Today, we're convening around the topic of feeding the more than 30 million children in the U.S. who depend on school meals for a significant portion of their nutrition, whether school is in session or not. While this is a critical issue and topic to solve for any day, these are not just any days, and the pandemic has exposed these issues even more. While approximately 124,000 schools are closed for classroom learning, 95% continue to remain open to provide emergency meal assistance for students during the pandemic. At the center of these efforts, and in partnership with corporate and nonprofit partners and school leaders nationwide, the youth wellness organization GENYOUth created the For School's Sake campaign. And today I'm honored to be joined by leaders who work to tackle this issue every day and quickly came together to create a program that focuses on the times we're currently living in. Please join me in welcoming Alexis Glick, the CEO of GENYOUth, Alberto Carvalho, the Superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and DJ Peony, who you may not be able to see, President of SAP North America, but you will be able to hear him. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes. All participants are muted, but you can submit your questions through the GoToWebinar chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. I encourage you to do so throughout the hour presentation and conversation. We will get to as many questions as possible before we wrap the conversation at 3 p.m. Finally, today's presentation will be recorded and archived on the Chamber Foundation website. We will also share the link to view this online as part of the post-event follow-up. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to start by having each of our speakers introduce themselves and just tell us all how you're doing right now. We know these are not typical times, and we'd love to hear how you, your families, and your organizations are doing. Alexis, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Elise, for having us, and thrilled to be here with Alberto and DJ. I'm hanging in there. I'm doing fine. I have an 8-year-old daughter who's like off to the edge of the side here. This is the new world of working from home, even though I told her to stay upstairs. But I'm doing just fine, hanging in there, thinking about a lot of folks going through a lot of tough times right now, and looking forward to this hour to share how we can support those who are most vulnerable.
Wonderful, thank you. Superintendent Carvalho, why don't we turn it over to you?
Good afternoon, Elise, Alexis, DJ, and all who are participating in today's webinar. My name is Alberto Carvalho. I'm the proud superintendent of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, our nation's 4th largest school system with 350,000 pre-K through 12 students, in addition to in excess of 50,000 adult learners in 7 technical colleges that we manage. And as a point of reference, 350,000 kids, 73.4% of whom depend on the free meals that Elise referenced. And I too am proud to participate in today's conversation, and I'm thankful for the work that GENYOUth has done in partnership with us over the past 5 years, life-saving, really making a dent, putting a dent on the food insecurity that's so prevalent throughout the country, and certainly here in Miami-Dade.
Wonderful, thank you, and thank you for joining us today. And DJ, we'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Elise. Of course, I work for SAP, a technology company, and I'm the one who's having the video problem. So unfortunately, some firewall issues, but it really is a pleasure to be here. My name is DJ Peony. I'm the president of SAP North America, and like everybody else, getting used to the new normal here with a couple teenagers at home. Hopefully you don't hear them TikToking in the back room here. So, but it's all good. Thank you for having me today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Why don't we get started, Alexis, by having you kick off today's conversation to share a little bit more about the For School's Sake campaign, and in particular, why Saturday, March 14th was such a significant day.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Elise. You know, I think as we date back, and for me, Saturday, March 14th is a really important day in the history of why we created the For School's Sake campaign and an emergency school nutrition fund to support what we believe are our frontline workers feeding our nation's kids. When you date back to that Saturday, the 14th, it was when we had just heard that Seattle was about to go shelter in place. And I woke up that Saturday morning and I just knew from the decade of the legacy of working in school buildings across the United States, in which we're essentially the largest health and wellness program in the nation, and our focus is on creating healthier school communities. I knew that if Seattle was about to go and shelter in place and others were to follow suit, that we were going to go through one of the most unprecedented moments in American history. Because for those of us who work in school buildings every day, like Alberto, very rarely do you ever want to shut down a school building, whether it's for a storm, whether it's for a natural disaster, because too many kids rely on school meals. And so I woke up on that Saturday and immediately said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about the kids who rely on school meals daily? What are we going to do in terms of communicating with the parents who need to know where the nearest school feeding site is so that they can care for their families? And so what did I do immediately? I reached out to a handful of people that I trust more than ever, who I knew could step in and help us. And those two people are the two people who are sitting here with us. I immediately called DJ and I said, DJ, I need help. And he said, what do you need? And I said, well, I've just gotten off the phone with the superintendent of Miami-Dade, one of the largest school districts in the United States. And we have talked about what are the barriers and the risks that he's going to face, whether it is how he's going to feed all those kids and how he's going to help care for those families, whether it's how he's going to communicate which school feeding sites are going to remain open after the first week or two of the pandemic, and which ones the school buildings might move to weeks into it. And so very quickly, I said to Alberto, what do you need? And with that, called DJ and said, listen, I need SAP's help. Within 45 minutes, he had a dozen people on the phone from across the globe, from public affairs, from engineers, from all different parts of SAP and Qualtrics. And we sat there and said, okay, what kind of technology could we create that we could give to families for them to geo-target based on their location the nearest school feeding sites, so that they could know what hours, when, and where to go to take care of their kids and their families. And we immediately said to him, for districts like Miami-Dade, how do we provide them additional food and additional resources? So we said, can we just not only provide a resource locator for where families and kids can go, but could we also be able to demonstrate how business leaders and corporations who want to provide in-kind resources, whether it be food, whether it be equipment, could we overlay our school footprint with those companies so that we can match supply and demand? And that's essentially what SAP stepped in to help us do, with the superintendent's incredible input about what he was living and breathing on the ground from moment one.
Thanks, Alexis. And that brings us to our next question. I think that's perfectly timed. Alberto, can you share a little bit about, we know that no two school districts are the same, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about what it feels like on the ground and what the experience has been like day to day. We know that you're constantly innovating to meet school feeding programs. There's the impact on school food professionals, educators, families. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is day to day?
Well, day to day, I know across the country has not been easy. Alexis, prior to the webinar starting, we were discussing how difficult distance learning has been. When you compound on top of those difficulties of distance learning, really essential functions for every human being, and there's nothing more essential than food. And in a community as poor as Miami-Dade's is, considering the level of food insecurity, that's a huge concern. So when we decided to shut down schools, and we shut down schools in advance of the mandatory statewide executive order for school closures, we had a plan in place to transition to distance learning. And by the way, we reached 100% connectivity with daily attendance around 91, 93%, highest in the country. But we also had plans in place because of our experience with hurricane closures to deal with this problem. We have fed the community after hurricane closures. We are the sheltering entity for the entire community. So we had some degree of experience, but we never faced anything for the prolonged period of time that we have experienced and the level of demand that we've been getting, which, by the way, has increased with each passing day. We are still in session. We are in summer vacation now. Unlike other districts in the north, our kids are no longer in school, but guess what? We continue to feed kids because hunger does not go away with the summer vacation, particularly after this health crisis that has created an economic crisis, which unfortunately has now morphed into possibly a food insecurity crisis wrapped around social injustice crisis levels across the country. Talk about a perfect storm. And I think the most humane thing that anyone who has the resources, the know-how, the skill, and the will can do is actually meet children and their families where they are. And that's quite frankly the beauty of GENYOUth, is that inspired by their knowledge, their resources, their assistance, their funding, we were able to dramatically amplify our reach and our impact. So some quick numbers as I close. Since we closed schools, we have fed in excess of 4 million meals out of 50 school distribution sites. That sounds like an awesome number, but it isn't. It represents a fraction of what we would have served in school. So we learned something, that for us to fill in the gap, we needed to diversify the delivery system. So we launched community family meals on the go, where we actually overlaid over the grid of our community the poorest zip codes with the highest concentrations of needy children, and partnering with local restaurants through a foundation have raised money, lots of money, where we actually supported local restaurants, acquired the food, brought it to the communities in need. We're doing now dinners on special days of the week, in addition to daily lunch feedings at these centers, in addition to the food distribution. Today, by the way, was the very first day of our summer vacation food distribution, which was sponsored by the best football team in America, the Miami Dolphins. And they committed to doing it for the entire year, not just during the summer. So that's where we are, a little bit of perspective of how we met the need, but I can tell you that a lot more needs to be done. And without effective partnerships, it does not happen.
Lisa, I would just add, listening to the superintendent, I think the most important thing that folks need to understand, and you can hear it echoed in his voice, is that when we talk about the 30 million kids who rely on school meals daily, and now millions more because of the north of 40 million who have applied for jobless claims, the thing we want folks to understand is that in America, ground zero for hungry kids is the school building. It was prior to the pandemic, and it remains so today. The thing about it is, even at the outset of the pandemic, and as Alberto points to right now in a summer feeding scenario, the government continues to deliver those meals into a school building, right? Those meals get delivered into a cafeteria. The problem is when the CDC guidelines come out and suggest that meal delivery is in a non-congregating way, immediately what we did was put exacerbated pressure on the school building, because he is not going to shut down or turn away a kid who doesn't fall within free and reduced eligible. He's not going to turn away a family. But the thing is, where the school building doesn't have the budget is for the delivery mechanism of those meals out of the cafeteria into a grab and go model. And what we have seen, the type of ingenuity we have seen from the superintendent and from other school districts across the United States to take those meals in a grab and go model, whether it be into a school parking lot, onto school buses, to school bus stops, means they need equipment, at least. And when we talk about that equipment, just to contextualize for just a moment, when we launched the For School's Sake campaign, we said to folks, for school's sake, help raise your hand and help us feed our nation's kids. We launched an emergency school nutrition fund to allow any school building in America to apply for up to $3,000 that grant is for them to get that equipment, whether it's cooler bags, whether it's the protective equipment, the refrigeration to take those meals outside the school building. Within days, we had millions of requests. So if you look at where we are today, we have over 12,000 school buildings in the United States that have requested over 35 million in funding. That was in a very short period of time. What I worry about is not just converting into summer feeding, but as they return back to school, this deficit is a deficit that these school buildings cannot afford. And they are facing budget cuts because of the fiscal nature of where states are addressing just the health concerns. And now the CDC guidelines heading into the summer and fall are going to be even more onerous on the school buildings. So when I look alone at the 12,000 school buildings that have requested funding and support, I see that number tripling, quadrupling in the days, weeks, and months ahead. It is a deficit that our school buildings have not seen in the history of this country. And it is staring them head on, and they are ground zero for feeding our nation's kids.
Alexis, thank you. You can feel the energy and the concern that all of us are feeling as you speak. And I think one of the big things that we do at the Chamber Foundation and that GENYOUth does is we talk about the power of partnerships and the role that the private sector plays in all of this work across issues. We know that there is no one silver bullet, there's not one silo and one stakeholder group that can solve, especially for a challenge like this. And I want to turn it over to DJ. We are not forgetting about you because we can't see your face. You are one of the most critical parts of this puzzle here. And I know that you at SAP, you were one of Alexis's first calls when she thought about how we can come together around this challenge. And I love when folks think of the private sector and their innovation in helping to solve for challenges every day. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about kind of both what made SAP respond so quickly to this challenge or quite honestly, any other challenge, and really how you thought about innovation. You know, we work with a lot of companies that really recognize the challenges of food insecurity now more than ever, and want to help companies innovate about thinking about their assets and where the gaps are in feeding. It's not just about financial resources, but there's gaps in technology and transportation. And so DJ, if you can tell us a little bit more about that and what SAP really jumped in to create and how folks can think about this going forward.
Sure, Elise, thank you. You know, it's too bad that the camera's not on. I showered today. I have a collared shirt on, like I was all ready to go. So,
well, now we'll just imagine, we'll all use our imaginations. I can only imagine what college shirt you're wearing.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, but if I go back to, to that Saturday, I mean, first and foremost, when Alexis Glick calls me, like I answer the phone, like that's just what happens. But she called me and she said, as she indicated, hey, I need your help. And she very, clearly articulated the problem and the need for quick action and said, hey, other private sector companies, I'm looking at helping us. So how about we use the collective resources, the platform that SAP has to help schools, help children during this urgent time. So, setting aside my involvement as a GENYOUth board member, as president of SAP, the largest business software company in the world, I saw the opportunity for us to really make an impact here, to leverage our technology, but more important, I think, leverage a network of employees who have strong values and who come to SAP to work for a purpose-driven company. And through the power of our technology and our platform and our reach and GENYOUth's access and credibility in the school communities, this program, as Alexis had articulated, is all about connecting people to the local resources and providing a simple path for organizations to offer additional support. So, in light of the current, situation with COVID, the disruption to students' lives with the closures of schools is just enormous. And, it's our goal to ensure that families will not miss meals that they desperately need each day. So when Alexis called, like she mentioned, within an hour, we brought together employees across marketing and development and sales, government relations, and corporate social responsibility who have a passion and a purpose. And, people worked nights and they worked weekends, they worked holidays, whatever it takes. Everybody has been just incredible. So we built this platform over a short period of time called SAP for Kids, and we used our technology and we created this app to make food locations accessible to anyone who needs it. It's easy to use, right? It uses a Google Map interface, GPS, locate sites in real time. And we had it up and running in a matter of days and not months. We also leveraged SAP Qualtrics technology to track some of the donations from organizations who, really can offer assistance with their resource. Like, this is the power of the network. This is the power of the private sector here. So we had everything from, food donation offers from small businesses to, offers for free telemedicine for families in need of care, from pediatric organizations. So, we are working with GENYOUth to really connect those resource offerings to the communities who need them most. Now, you asked the question, what can we do beyond just, donating money? I think, private sectors, when I looked at this, I said, okay, private sectors, companies need to think about how they can leverage their own unique platform, right? We looked at it through the lens of where can SAP uniquely deliver value beyond just donating money? Like, what can we do that we think no other organization is in a position to do? And so for us, it's our people. As I had mentioned, first and foremost, we have 100,000 employees who work for SAP because of our mission. And I know that drives, that's what drives our employees, and they know that they can make a difference. And I think, we have 450,000 customers as well. So for us, we know we can leverage our reach. So we reached out to our network of great customers like Intel, who stepped in right away to help. And we said, let's put together a team of employees and let's leverage, the great technology that we have and the entire ecosystem of partners to really just, go beyond donating money.
Wonderful. Thank you, DJ. We love hearing that. We know that now more than ever, companies are stepping in and really driving with purpose and their people. And I think this is a perfect example. We had a question come in from the audience that I want to turn to for a moment. And Alberto, I think I'll start with you on this one, but certainly if others have thoughts, I'd love to hear from all of you. Moving into the new, sorry about that. Moving into the new school year, how can schools engage more with restaurants to feed and help both the community and students? And I think I'll even expand on this, and just because I know Miami-Dade has done this really well, just local partners overall, but then more specifically restaurants.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Number one, I think that there are opportunities for local collaboration partnership, but the transformational type of partnership really happens with large entities that are at least nationally based. So I'll give an example. We would not have had the reach that we had were it not for GENYOUth and Domino's. So you don't get to dozens of thousands of meals regularly being distributed to the areas of greatest need without that infrastructure, without that knowledge of logistics and ability for distribution. What we did here in Miami did help. And the steps are easy. Usually because these are private sector monies, they're easier used if they do not hit the public sector financials. So we created a foundation with its own identity registered through the state of Florida. It bypasses the public sort of bureaucracy. Secondly, we were benefited to a certain extent by the ongoing crisis. So restaurants were literally going to go out of business. People were not employed, as Alexis said, and these are the same individuals, the workers whose children attend our school system. So it was easier to negotiate a price level per unit that really stretched our impact. So it's good to identify the restaurants beforehand with a lens through equity to ensure that there is equitable representation, geographic, ethnic representation, equitable representation in terms of racial, ethnic, types of business ownership. And then it's also recognizing where the need is greatest and coordinate, utilizing, that's where the partnership is. We use foundation monies that were deposited by philanthropic entities in our community, by business partners. And I can tell you, we reached $1.1 million in a matter of weeks. Add that to GENYOUth's, contributions, which provided logistics, equipment, training, even supplements for teachers, and actual food through local partners. Then we had a great deal of reach. But those monies then were used to actually purchase meals from these restaurants that had been pre-identified, meeting the criteria. Then we use our own transportation system for food and nutrition, our own delivery trucks to pick up the food, deliver the food with our own manpower. And that's why we've been able to distribute 47,000 meals cooked by local restaurants, in addition to 46,000 meals courtesy of GENYOUth Domino's partnership with important, well-developed logistics based on where the need is greatest. So this is as much skill as it is will to get it done. And let me close by saying this. The kids we are hitting, the kids we are impacting, are the kids who before the crisis were already in crisis. And this COVID pandemic just deepened the hole that they were in. So if we do not create a ladder of opportunity, and the opportunity is created not only by making food available, because Alexis is absolutely right, when we resume normalcy, whatever that is, it's not going to be the old normal, the new normal, we will still have a challenge. And by the way, the challenge is both regulatory in nature. USDA is operating on old concepts that need to be reformatted. So the concept that a child needs to pick up the meal at the school they attend, that works well perhaps when conditions are normal. But when there is a crisis, all that falls apart if kids are bused to different schools. The time in which food is distributed, now we got some concessions from the USDA, but those are temporary. We need to change the policy. We need greater partnerships between funding entities, and the public sector alone cannot do it. The private sector is indispensable to meet the need where the need is.
Lisa, I would just love to add something for a moment, because I'll tell you, my career and background is in the private sector. For me to be running a philanthropy today is not necessarily what I had planned, and yet part of the reason that when we look at the board of directors at GENYOUth or our partnerships across corporate America, we have a lot of very incredible partnerships in large measure because what I have said to the private sector, leaders like DJ, like Russell from Domino's, who I called on that Saturday the 14th to help support the superintendent as well, is I've said to these private sector leaders is, listen, you know how to run a P&L. I've sat there, I've spent a career managing and looking at your balance sheet. You understand you can't just stand for something, that you have to do something. You have something called time, talent, and treasure. I need you to give me your time, talent, and treasure. So when Alberto's talking about the logistics and the distribution and the using the know-how of national corporate entities, that's what we need more of. I am a huge believer in public-private partnerships. And when I look at what is the glass is half empty versus the glass is half full about what I have witnessed over the last 14 weeks, and I have heard stories that tear my heart apart. And then I have heard stories, or I receive messages from some of the, from some of the principals or some of the educators, whether it's in his school district or in the 80,000 school buildings that we're in at GENYOUth across the United States, who are saying thank you. And they're saying, you know why they're saying thank you? They're not just saying thank you for the $3,000 grant that helped us deliver those meals in a grab and go model, but what they're saying is thank you for not forgetting. Thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for remembering that, yes, the healthcare workers are frontline workers, but the school nutrition professionals are just as much frontline workers. They are feeding our kids. We have school bus drivers who are dressing up in costumes to deliver meals. So when I look back, Elise, the thing that God is my witness, the thing I will remember, the beauty of this, is that when I look at the outset of this and the kinds of partners who've come around the table, I called America's dairy farmers on day one, and I said, I need your help. Same thing, I need your time, talent, and treasure. What does that mean, Alexis? I need your products, I need your know-how, I need your logistics, I need your people, I need your registered dietitians. When we look at the kinds of people, whether it's farmers, whether it's SAP, Berkshire Hathaway, the Rockefeller Foundation, when we look at what we've done with Albertsons said to us, Alexis, show us every application from every school building within our zip codes across the United States. So remember how we talked about overlaying our school footprint with the footprint of our partners. With Albertson, we overlaid the zip code of every single Albertson store with the grant request within a 25-mile radius. And you know what they said to us? They said to us, send us 200 of your applications a week. We will review the applications, and within 4 days' time, we will come back to you on which ones we can support. We sit here today, and Albertsons alone has been able to help us support about 600 schools. Today, as we sit here, we've now supported 7,000 schools across the United States. Now, we're super proud of it, but we recognize the need is growing, but the type of innovation, the type of commitment from the private sector, I can tell you right now, and I guarantee you the superintendent would say this too, if we did not have them step in, the situation would have been far more dire.
And Alexis, this DJ, if I can just add a quick point here. I mean, I just want to stress to any of the private sector companies that might have joined us today and who are on the line here about being able to do more than just provide money and donate money. I mean, for those on the line, think about how you can uniquely help. What is your platform? What is your reach? I think we've only scratched the surface with this app that we developed. I mean, we've connected thousands of feeding sites. I mean, if we can do this with food, we can do this with clothing. We can do this for housing. I mean, it's the applicability to this, in my opinion, is endless, and it's just at the very beginning. And I know that if this pandemic is prevalent in the fall, which many experts believe, we are going to need the private sector, our customers, our partners to lean in real heavy here and help. And that would be my ask.
Thanks, DJ.
I need to add something very quickly. What Alexis and DJ laid out was basically a definition of the safety net that every community needs. It's about food, housing, social and emotional support, education, right? And to give you some perspective, out of our 350,000 kids, there are 9,000 active homeless kids in our school system. About 800 of them live in shelters. The rest of them live with families or are unaccompanied, and they're couch surfing. It's a real need, and it is absolutely right. Our shelter assistance programs are by and large funded by the private sector. Our efficient distribution of clothing, which we do through a free shop for needy and homeless kids, are funded through the foundation by the private sector. And I would agree also, money is golden because that's how you buy food ultimately. But the logistics support, the engineering, the science behind the distribution, the most effective way of actually meet the need where the need is, rather than believing that every single person in need and crisis has the means and the know-how or the ability or opportunity to come to where the need is satisfied. We've learned that, we continue to learn that across America. And that solution is not enabled simply by the public sector, is not enabled simply by the private sector. It relies on a seamless partnership between public and private sector, using our knowledge, our need, our information, match it up against good science and logistics and engineering, and it gets it done. And I think that's why we've been successful here in Miami-Dade, but a lot more needs to be done.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. You set up this next question, which one of our audience members took right from my own notes, which is Alexis. So can you tell us a little bit more about the actual fund, and then how companies and chamber members, can step in to support GENYOUth and this effort? Where do they turn so that they can figure out, is it financial resources? Is it leveraging their existing talent and business and assets? Tell us how we can get folks involved.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, look, so as we shared, we created an emergency school nutrition fund. The purpose of that fund is for us to provide up to $3,000 per school building for them to get the resources they need to deliver vital meals daily safely to our kids. And those resources are very specific. In fact, we can share what those resources look like down to the zip code, any state, you name it. When you actually look at the level of demand that we see across the country, in many ways it mirrors what a COVID-19 map might look like. But what those resources are largely things like cooler bags, whether it's protective equipment, whether it's grab-and-go containers, whether it's the transportation and portability of those meals. So as I shared with you, we have over 12,000 applications as we sit here today. We've got to fill that gap. We have, as I shared with you, a $35 million of requests, and yet we've already supported 7,000 schools as we sit here today. But cash is one thing. The other thing I would just add, let me just give you some ideas, because when we look at the categories of requests that we're getting, our categories are transportation and the serving of food, cold storage, sanitation, preparation, and what we call other. If you look just in transportation and serving of food, gas carts, van bus rentals, bags, brown paper bags, Ziploc bags, hand trucks. If you look in cold storage, cooler bags, reusable ice bags, refrigerators, ice boxes. If you look at sanitation, it's things like garbage bags, hair nets, rubber gloves, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer. You look at preparation, everything from utensils, pots, pans, etc. And one of the things that the superintendent referenced before that we are getting requests for are stipends. Because you need more hands on deck to help support you, or volunteers to give of their time, as I shared, their personal time, talent, and treasure. So those are the kinds of resources that we need. I'll give you a couple quick specific examples. SC Johnson reached out to us in part because of the SAP for Kids platform that we had created, and a lot of the media that I've been doing across the country. And they came to us and they said, Alexis, we've got 8 million Ziploc bags. Could you use them? I said, are you kidding? Could I use them? Yes, like I need them right now. I mean, so we've placed those in some of the largest school districts across the country, but we've had partners like Voss come and donate water. We've had, companies, cooler bag companies. So net, the bottom line is, when you think about the types of resources and equipment that a school building needs, I want you to just put yourself in their shoes and just think about the nature of taking those meals out of a cafeteria into a grab-and-go model. And one critical thing I'll just add is, as I wrap up here, is that CDC's guidelines that they came out with about 4 weeks ago for recommendations as to how schools serve meals when school goes back to session for whatever normal looks like, is that meals not be served in the cafeteria. Their number one recommendation is that meals now be served in the classroom. What that is going to mean is that it's going to once again put pressure on superintendents and school districts to change the delivery mechanism out of the cafeteria into the classroom. So when you think about all those things, whether it's cooler bags, whether it's grab-and-go containers, all of those items, again, are going to be incredibly important. So to me, when we look at long-term sustainable change, we often feel it is the equipment that creates that long-term sustainable change. And that's in part, in large measure, what we've done with the superintendent in Miami-Dade, is how do I get him more equipment that he can use year after year after year? A lot of these tools and resources that we're talking about that companies can donate are the types of things that they can continue to use well through the school year, if not into the 21-22 school year.
I have to
Thank
add a little something to that because I really need to speak about the example that applies directly here to Miami-Dade through GENYOUth. Look, we looked at our data and daily participation through the food and nutrition program, particularly for children, students on the free and reduced lunch program, federally funded. And we saw that there was an anomaly in the middle school years. Now, we all know what's happening with kids in their middle school years. Their cognitive development, their physical development is all coming together, hormonal shifts faster than the speed of light. And if you add to that food insecurity, matched by sleep patterns are irregular for that age group, we really have a problem. So we said, you know what, let's look at perhaps the precursors to academic gaps and how we can cure them. Guess what? Not enough middle school kids were eating breakfast in the morning. We saw a huge disparity between the breakfast meals served to middle school kids versus lunch. Why lunch? By lunch, most of the kids are there, but the latecomers usually skip breakfast. So guess what we did? Recognizing the problem and using our intent to reform and reinvent middle schools into more appealing, student-centric experiences. We said we need to change the way we make food accessible to kids. So we have about 50 middle schools in Miami-Dade. GENYOUth, part of the solution. Rather than having every single kid go to the cafeteria regardless of the time they arrive at the building, why not have a grab-and-go cart with healthy food accessible to them regardless of the time they get to school? Now, you could say, he should have been here on time. But we know that if you deprive the kid who didn't eat at home from food until lunchtime, he's not going to learn. She's not going to learn. So this was a, now that I think back, easy solution, but we would not have come up with it by ourselves. So a different delivery model, completely funded by GENYOUth, set up for this coming year. We actually launched it during a Super Bowl here in Miami with more stars than I ever thought I could be around. But now the model is set and ready to go for the 2021 school year. And guess what? We will need it then more than ever because social distancing, different models of food distribution, I think will force the rest of the country to really adapt a model that provides food to kids without concentrating kids in cafeterias. So, we didn't think about the crisis when we were doing this, but the kids we were doing it for, as I said earlier, were already in their own crisis. So that's a specific example of how we advantage the funding that comes from the private sector, the engineering, the distribution model to really increase daily participation.
Thank you, Alberto. So basically, we need to clone all three of you, and then we'll be set. I want to turn for a moment. I know there are so many things we could talk about here. I do want to turn for a moment and be thoughtful about our time. GENYOUth developed a recent survey on life disrupted and the impact that COVID-19 has been having on teens specifically. And they are releasing these insights to the world today, and we are so delighted that they held this conversation for us to talk about here. And so, Alexis, I wanted you to spend a couple minutes talking about this, knowing that we have done a series of conversations in particular around mental health and physical wellness and how this has impacted not only parents, but teens and children. And so it's something we've talked about here and held events around. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you all found in terms of distress and how the crisis is impacting teens and how all of us can come together around solutions.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. We, as you referenced, at GENYOUth, our true north is we're about building healthier school communities. But one of the three pillars of our organization is that we give youth a voice. Our programs don't exist without the kids helping us curate, elevate, and define our programmatic work, whether that's Fuel Up to Play 60 that we do in partnership with the NFL and America's Dairy Farmers and the Miami Dolphins, or whether that's our Adventure Capital program, which is our social entrepreneurship program for high school age kids. And so what we realized years ago is that we support at GENYOUth 40 million kids daily in about 75,000 of our nation's schools. And we recognize that their voice is the voice that is most critical to our work. So we started creating insights surveys where we went directly to them. And what we decided about 8 weeks ago is we said, you know what, we're hearing an awful lot of adults speak, but we are not going directly to kids to see how they are dealing with this pandemic. What has it done to their sense of resilience? What has it done to the way they learn? And what about those milestone moments that they're missing? And so today with you, we are releasing this new survey, which really talks about what the quarantine has done to all aspects of their life. And in the context of what's happening in this country around race and inequality, I would argue that the results couldn't be more timely. So this is the first of its kind real sense from kids 13 to 18 years old of how they're coping. I'll share with you a couple brief data points, and then you can go to genyouthnow.org to now look at the entire survey. And I think you're going to see some things that you go, oh my God, you know, sort of strikes you to the core. Number one, 1 in 4 are really concerned about their family's well-being, and they feel that they've been directly impacted by the pandemic. Whether that be the concern about their parents' job, their ability to buy food or pay bills. In fact, almost 9 out of 10 of these kids are real distressed. And if you look at those numbers in particular, whether it's the less affluent kids, the older or urban kids, that number is closer to 1 in 3. When you look at things that they've missed out on, the milestone moments in their life, the access and ability to be physically active and to participate in sport, it is one of the highest indexing things that has really disrupted their sense of being and belonging. And they're asking us some very basic questions that are very difficult for us to answer. They're trying to understand, when will we get back to normal? What does normal look like? Will we be financially okay? Can I play sports? And if I can, is my future at risk? I mean, the kinds of things that these kids share in this survey are pretty extraordinary. And I will just briefly say to you guys that, look, I am a huge believer that everything we have to do, everything we do, and boy, oh boy, does the superintendent practice this every single day. It is about for kids and with kids, and their voice has gone missing in this pandemic. And we are going to do everything in our power to elevate their voice. It's one of the #1 things we do with SAP in our work with Adventure Capital. And when we release this survey, you'll see us all over the airwaves. It's going to be shared out with the public tomorrow. As I said, you can download it on our website. But let me tell you something. One of the things we've done in the last 10 days is talk to them about how they feel about race and inequality, coupled with what they're facing with this pandemic. When you say, Elise, the kinds of things that they're facing, food insecurity, questions about their family's well-being, questions about the mental health impact of either distance learning or being left behind or not having the technology and resources to stay connected. The superintendent is the anomaly when he says he's got 92, 93% of the kids connected. Many kids have been left behind in the digital divide. But add to it what's happening around race and inequality, and the kinds of things kids have said to us have been remarkable. I personally have turned over my social media channels. I have decided that every Thursday from this point forward, I am going to turn over my social media channels to one student in our programs. I have asked others to do the same, just to hear their voice and make sure that they're telling us what they need to hear as we go back into the fall. So thank you for asking about it. We've held it for this session with you guys. It will be held, it will be shared publicly tomorrow. But I think when you see the insights that our kids are sharing with us, it's going to help us understand why the role of school buildings today and in the days, months, and years ahead is going to be more extraordinary than ever. They're going to feed our kids, educate our kids, address mental health issues, address things around physical activity. I mean, my goodness, does the superintendent have a big job ahead of him?
Thank you. Before we wrap, what I'd love to do is just ask each of you, and DJ, we'll start with you. I want to make sure folks are not forgetting about you there. What is just, if folks on the phone want to get off this conversation and act right away, what is one thing that they can do to jump in and be part of the solution here?
So thanks, and I appreciate you thinking about me, even though you can't see me. You know, I just think, you know, Alberto and Alexis, you've been just so inspiring, and really proud to be partners with you. And I would say the one thing is this is about getting the word out, right? We all have the resources to do this in the private sector. The applications are unlimited. The need is unlimited. And, you know, at SAP, we see ourselves as a connector of, you know, technology, so that we can connect supply and demand. And I think, you know, one thing I want to make sure that people don't forget about, and Alexis, you mentioned this, is mental health, right? This is an issue with parents as well, not just children. It's an issue with parents, right? Navigating working from home, teaching kids, you know, blurring work and personal life. I think, you know, we've created a crisis leave, you know, given some extra days off, some flexible work hours. So that is definitely something that the private sector can do immediately. But I think those are just a couple ideas.
Thank you. Alberto, let's turn to you.
I'll do it very briefly.
Yep.
So thank you. Let me thank DJ as well, because, you know, I keep talking about private sector partners, but I remember the night Alexis called me and she says, listen, I got to talk to you, and I need this information now because I need to pass it on to the enablers of solutions. And I think some of the folks on the line, and I want to thank the Chamber, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. This is the second webinar I'm doing with or for the U.S. Chamber. So the private sector entity is indispensable to what I do. And I have to say that part of my success as superintendent for the past 12 years, when usually superintendents in large school systems only last about 2 to 3 years, is I have my posse, and my posse is the Superintendent's Business Advisory Council that is composed of the who's who in a private sector in our community. That's who looks at my budget before I present it to my board. That's who advises me on healthcare decisions, big issues. So here's my quick advice, and I'm going to take this from GENYOUth's investment of time, talent, and treasure right here in Miami-Dade. You know, support the Emergency Nutrition Fund. Make donations and support the teacher stipends that are necessary. Alexis didn't say it, but GENYOUth is far more than just nutrition, and that justice doesn't give it justice, because just nutrition is huge. It's important. It's about fitness as well. Equipment for schools. Yeah, kids should eat well, you know, nutritious meals, balanced meals, have the appropriate social and emotional support, but also exercise. Well, guess what? GENYOUth provides 2 of those 3 for us. And now the information is going to be released as a 3rd one. But it goes beyond that. The 2 more. Albertsons was a perfect example. There are entities across the country that can provide monetary support, but it can also be frontline enablers of solutions within the radius around them. That's important. And then last but not least, it's really something that we spent quite a bit of time a while ago. It's the engineering and the support for the equipment that's necessary to really touch all kids. That means distribution models beyond the traditional cafeteria. And that takes money for equipment, whether it's the coolers, the grab-and-go carts, or support for transportation to take the food to where the people are. So those are just some ideas of how the support can be made. And I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but if you want to do it faster, don't just write a check to school boards. school districts or superintendents, if there's a foundation that's populated by members of the community that have a different level of oversight, it enables quick response to crisis, great. But better yet, support national entities like GENYOUth that have the know-how on how to provide solutions to willing partners that actually make it work.
Oh my goodness, that's such a tough act to follow. You two are so remarkable. At least, first of all, I want to thank the Chamber from the bottom of my heart, DJ and the superintendent. I could not be more blessed. I mean, look, I'm a kid who grew up in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in a post-World War II project. You know, my mom put peanut butter and baked ziti on the table because that's all we had. And so when I sit in this position as a kid who really did come from corporate America, and I look at my partners in corporate America, it's really simple. I just want you to put yourself in the eyes of the kid. And right now, all they're asking for is a little bit of hope. And when I look at the superintendent, the reason I am so madly, deeply crazy about him and his team is because when you go look at him on social media, you see him delivering meals. You see him inspiring his kids. And right now, what they need is to know that we are there for them. And so whether that's turning over your social media channels, whether that's supporting our emergency school nutrition fund so we can get more $3,000 grants to school buildings, whether that's equipment, whether that's resources, it's simply showing kids, we believe in you, we're here for you. And every one of us has one of those stories when we were a kid about someone who did something for us. And when I look at those school nutrition professionals, those are the cafeteria ladies who put that meal on your plate when you sat in the cafeteria as a kid. And what they're doing right now is God's work. And my job is really simple. How do I make their job easier? Because they are doing things that break my heart some days, and other days they are doing things that inspire me beyond reproach. But our kids need us now, and where they need us the most is in our school buildings.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, DJ, Alberto, Alexis, your organizations, and thank you all for joining us today. These issues are complex, and we won't solve them in one webinar, and we won't solve them in our silos. So I hope we can all continue to collaborate and innovate together. As I mentioned, you'll receive an email with the recording of this conversation. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any folks on the team to get in touch and to help contribute to this work, or just brainstorm and talk together about what else we can talk through in the weeks and months ahead. We look forward to staying in touch, and stay healthy and well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.